Hello, everyone. It's Melissa Santana, your co-host of the Miss Texas Show. Super excited because we have a wonderful guest with us today. Her name is Elizabeth Sullivan. She is the brains behind the wonderful organization known as Empower Survivors. And so that organization is located in Stillwater, Minnesota. That organization provides a variety of services for survivors, including classes, peer mentorship. They've done conferences in the past and all of that. And so you will get to learn more about the wonderful woman behind that effort, all the great things that, she does with it, and a little bit more about her and her incredible journey. So stay tuned. And thank you, as always, for your support.
The Ms. Texas Show is a voice of hope for victims, survivors, advocates, and community leaders against gender-based violence to share their stories and resources. We began showcasing life in Texas. Today we are impacting lives not only in Texas, but also around the world. Under our segment Military Time, we run this segment in partnership with the National Veterans Chamber of Commerce. We invite military and veterans who have overcome traumatic events to share their experiences during and after their military service. Under our beauty segment, we invite fellow pageant winners and contestants, artists, musicians, actors, models, and dancers, and last but not least, our survivor leaders from family violence, sex trafficking, sexual assault, stalking, and other traumatic events who are ambassadors for these causes to share their lives and the impact they have made. To become a guest on our show, email us at msusatexas@gmail.com. If you would like to support victims and survivors of gender-based violence, make a tax-deductible donation to Hope Picks Global at www.hopepyxglobal.org.
I'm super excited as always to be here with you, Melissa Santana, co-host. The second part, I would say, of this lovely effort. And as always, I'm super excited about our guest that we have. And today's guest is no less, any less of an honor and pleasure to have. And I'm just so happy that they took time to be with us today because that person is Elizabeth Sullivan. Elizabeth Sullivan, as you all did not know, is the founder and executive director of Empower Survivors, which is a peer-led nonprofit. So it's also a 501c3 organization. It is based in Stillwater, Minnesota. It was during her own healing journey that Elizabeth realized survivors of childhood sexual abuse needed an organization that offered safe spaces of healing and support. So since 2014, Empower Survivors has supported survivors locally, nationally, and worldwide through all the support groups, classes, conferences, and peer support relationships that they and mentorships that they offer. Elizabeth has been a guest speaker on numerous podcasts, radio shows, and in the local news. She has testified before the Minnesota State Legislature and works with advocacy groups to bring awareness to childhood sexual abuse. She believes in uniting our voices, supporting survivors on their healing journey, educating communities, and reducing the adverse childhood experiences that not only affect the survivor, but their families, society, and community institutions. And so with that, we are super, super excited to take part in that, to also bring more awareness today, to add on to that education, and to add to this very, very important conversation. So Elizabeth, thank you so very, very much. Like I said, for taking the time, being with us today. And I just really would love to start off by this, having viewers take a minute to just, get to know you better. Like, who are you? A little bit about your journey, what brought you here, all that.
All right. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I think it's an honor. So I appreciate you having me on your show. So as you had mentioned, I'm an abuse survivor. So for me, my abuse started around the age of 4, and from 4 to 17, basically there was different molestations and rape. There was several different perpetrators. I did, now I'm where I'm at now, I see that the behaviors of myself that came out of the abuse, led to, academic issues, led to being with partners that maybe weren't the healthiest, led to, early pregnancy and teen pregnancy and that sort of thing. And I didn't realize how much that had affected me until I was in my 40s and was married with children. And at that time in our local area, the Archdiocese of St. Paul, which is a Catholic archdiocese, there was a lot of abuse coming out from the local archdiocese. So between that and being in a relationship, marriage that was toxic, the combination of two of those things and other things besides that really blew the lid off for me as far as dealing with the abuse. So I ended up in the hospital dealing with panic attacks, flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, and basically at that time had my life turned upside down. Because suddenly I'm dealing with all these things that I never dealt with before, and I certainly never told anybody, and that sort of thing. And through my healing, I realized that, I wasn't unique in this. I didn't realize how many people were sexually abused and what all that meant, that it wasn't just the act, but so much more that's involved in that and what happens to kids. So that's when I basically started the organization in 2014, because I noticed looking around that there just wasn't anything for somebody who was maybe in their 40s, 50s, 60s, dealing with this, that, the box flies open and you're not just remembering things, you're actually right back there in the abuse. And it was at that time that I became more interested in learning about peer support and in this sort of thing, which is a little bit different than regular therapy. And I found that being with others that had experienced this, that there's a lot of power in that, being with other survivors, learning, growing. And so at that point, I guess I would say that I turned into a trauma geek, if you could say that. And I just, anything I could get my hands on that was something that was going to teach me about the abuse, teach me about why I may have done things when I was young, why I would have, picked some of the people I picked to date and get in relationships with. And so I really submerged myself into the trauma world, taking a lot of classes, educating myself on trauma. And then, even though we started the organization in 2014, I still hadn't become a nonprofit. So in 2016, that's when I decided to go ahead and turn it into a nonprofit. And we've been operating ever since.
Wow. Well, thank you so very much, first of all, for sharing all that with us, and just, and letting us know that incredible journey, and being able to then turn that around. There's a lot that I was fascinated by. But I would definitely say what I'm impressed by, moved by, is that, okay, so you definitely went through all that. And first of all, I am very sorry to hear, of course, I'm glad that you're on the other side of this, you've had time to heal, but it's still never easy to hear that amount of time though, right? So and I would hope that I would never get to the point where I'm desensitized enough to be oh, okay, no big deal. 4 to 17, yeah. Okay, awesome. That's cool. Glad you did that. What? That's an incredible, that, because it's such a big chunk of your life. So it's just, and it just makes sense why anybody experiencing abuse for that long is going to become a part of their life. How is that not normalized? Literally as you were growing up, literally as you're learning things about the world, this is happening. So I just think that's such an incredible time. And I have daughters, so I'm thinking wow, for them to have already, to know that my youngest would have already been abused, apparently, according to what we're discussing, is just, it's unfathomable, but unfortunately it's a reality, that many have faced, including yourself. So first of all, I appreciate you even, finding us worthy to share, honestly. But so with that, what was also curious about that too is that, so unlike others, so there's many people, right, on different journeys, they're in different, stages, and, they figure it out also at different times. With you, I think what's very interesting is that, so there was a big chunk of your life where you were facing abuse. But then you did get married, though. You know what I mean? It's not like you healed after. Some people go through a healing process and then they get married and all that. So I think what's fascinating, I was wait, so you got married first and then you kind of figured it out. So I'm just kind of oh, could you walk us through that? Because, because what I'm curious about is your partner was that person supportive? Did they see signs? Did they not know? Were you just good at hiding it? Like, I'm just so curious. Like, and the fact that you have family. So I'm just curious about that. If you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm actually divorced now.
Oh,
I think it would have, it's, and as far as the healing journey, I think I'm going to be on it till the day I die, quite frankly. I mean, there's little things that come up here and there where it's like, okay, I have more to process and that sort of thing.
right.
But as far as marriage, unfortunately, I didn't know what healthy was. I didn't know what a healthy relationship was. I didn't know what it looked like. And, if I had, I probably, I would have been more aware of red flags. And unfortunately, at that time, I wasn't. And so I went into a marriage with low self-worth, low self-esteem. And because I had gotten pregnant before marriage, my thought was that if I get married, then my children will have a chance to have a father that lives in their home and, have this family that I didn't have as a child growing up. And so it became very important for me to be the best wife I could be, to be the best mother of my children I could be. But unfortunately, when I started to get healthy, and another thing you mentioned, did he know about it? I never told him. It wasn't till probably 4 years before we got divorced that I actually told him. And that's when I got the interest in starting the nonprofit and that sort of thing. He was always there, but not necessarily supportive. But it was through my own healing journey that I discovered just how unhealthy the relationship was. And unfortunately, I think for not only myself, but a lot of survivors, is once we start to find healing and start to see what healthy is and start to kind of unravel all the lies we took in. Unfortunately, at that time, I realized that this was, what I had been involved in for 20 something years was rather toxic. And so at that time, it's either the two people are going to come alongside each other and do their individual growth and then grow together, or, in my case, it ended up going the other way. I realized that as I was getting healthy, he wasn't necessarily looking to do self-improvement in himself. And I'm sure, in his defense, I'm sure he thought, what the heck's going on with this woman? Because, basically I thought she was normal, or what's normal, but I thought this woman was normal. And now all of a sudden she's having flashbacks, she's having all this, and who is this person? So, I'm sure there was frustrations for him as well. But at a certain point, I had to realize that what I had gotten my kids into, and the marriage, that it wasn't really healthy for anybody involved. And so at that time, I ended up, not that I wanted to, but I ended up filing for divorce.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, I think it's glad that we're like sharing those honest things about it. Nobody ever like is ready for something like divorce, though, right? Like nobody's like, yay, I'm gonna get married because eventually I'm gonna leave this person. I mean, we hope it's gonna work out. Like we definitely, go into it with all those best intentions. But I think, and I appreciate, and I'm definitely sorry to hear about the divorce, but I am glad to hear, like what you said, and the fact that honestly you chose yourself, which is something that you had not learned to do growing up, clearly, and unfortunately you had learned like abuse was your life and that had to be your life story. So, despite it having to end in divorce, at least it meant that, you were choosing, something healthy first. So I definitely feel like, despite that cost that came with it, that of course it was a great choice, that you made. But I think that you shed light again on some, very pivotal things, right? Is that sometimes we don't, like, given the fact that you had not had a chance to face your healing prior, it made you unprepared, honestly. A lot of us, I think, are unprepared, though, like you mentioned. I don't know that any of us are, like, prepared for marriage. I don't know that we're ever going to be at the point. And that's why I love how you said, you were like, oh, yeah, healing is going to be, like, a lifelong thing for me. I mean, it's not like I'm ever just going to stop healing. I agree. Like, sometimes I see stuff about, like, with relationships. Like, I think I saw one this morning, and it was like, you should stay single until you're like healed. And I'm like, but really though? Because I have issues with that. I'm like, And I'm single too, so same. I also had a marriage before, not there anymore. And it was similar reasons to yourself that it was like I had to choose healthy, and I also had multiple children with the person. But I was like, hey, gotta, do what's better. But yeah, reading that, I was like, I don't know though, because I feel like first of all, when are we ever perfectly healed, And so like number one, and then number two, how long am I going to be waiting then? So it's like, I'm never going to be fully prepared. But I think what I loved about what I heard about you though, is that whoever that person is, it's going to be great that you will be able to share about yourself. Because what's interesting is you got married to a person who didn't know, like you said, that part about you, but it wasn't just a part. That was a very big chunk of your life. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
25 years.
Exactly.
Basically, I was with them.
Right. That's why I think it's so fascinating that like you guys were able to get married, and then but technically had never even indulged, in that. So it's kind of like you almost hadn't really been able to share a whole piece of yourself, with him.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So it's like, and unfortunate as that is, it doesn't make it surprising, right? That eventually you might have had to part ways because of that. And I'm sure, whoever, in your future, I'm sure you'd want different for that, and also different for like potential partners for your children too. Like
Absolutely. And I think, when, I think we kind of find our emotional equal. Absolutely. And, at the beginning, that was my emotional equal. We both brought, I guess you could say, luggage to the marriage. I mean, both of us had things that we need to work on and that sort of thing. And, but, it's funny, now that I'm 4 years out from the divorce, there's just still so much I'm learning about, the power I gave up during that marriage, what the abuse part of it was. And so I'm still evolving. And I can remember saying to my middle child when she graduated from high school, I said, it's almost like we both just graduated, because the first time in my life now, I'm turning into the woman that I want to be, rather than being the woman that everybody else wanted me to be. And so there's something really freeing in that, but at the same time, it's scary. And here you are coming out of a marriage where, I was a stay-at-home mom. So, you're coming out of that going, oh my gosh, when I go to the store, what can I buy? What can I buy? And you're realizing, oh, I get to make the choices. I get to have a choice now. And
incredible, right?
And this is stuff that other people would just be like, yeah, that's a no-brainer. But for me, I didn't know healthy. And I'm still learning, but I certainly wouldn't ignore the red flags, today. I guess I really didn't ignore them per se, but more, I just didn't know what the red flags were. Now I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, could you have gotten slapped any harder in the face with a red flag? What did it take to get you to get it, But it took a lot of therapy and submerged myself into that. And then also getting involved in groups and that sort of thing. And then in turn, I decided at a certain point to, when I got further enough in my healing, just to be able to use that and say, okay, this isn't going to destroy me. And now I'm going to use this to try and help other people. And I think there's something really important about that. I love seeing survivors that have, done a big chunk of their healing, and then using that to just go out and help others. I think it's really important.
It is. And that's why I think that's what's so beautiful about what you're doing, right? Is that you like turn this into something that is just so beautiful and so helpful and inspiring and can help others, but it's also coming from a place of knowledge, what I'm saying, and true, genuine concern, but also like, you definitely, more than anyone what that's like and what it, what it took to get out of it, just everything about it. But you made me think of another one that I saw this morning too, when you said you don't know what you don't know with those red flags.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's like, and because we're quick to do that too. We're quick to be like, oh, well, how did you not know? Like, I mean, I'm talking to that person. I know that they're like aggressive and abusive. Okay, but I didn't. Okay, because how about I came from what I came from, and I saw this all the time. So like, it was very hard to decipher something when that's all you used to see. So I think this is normal communication. Like, I thought this is how people talk, and
exactly.
Yeah. So that was another one. And I think that was what I saw was that, okay, so there was the one about, you should get with someone when you're healed. The other one was, how much time could you have saved if when you saw the first red flag, you walked away? That was another one I had issue with because I was like, okay, again, I don't know who these people are giving out advice. I appreciate it, but I just feel like that's not always the case, because people don't necessarily know that they're seeing red flags. And honestly, even if they see them, they might not be ready to leave, So like,
Absolutely.
Right. So I don't think we can always put timeline on things and just tell people like, oh, well, you should have just, you should have immediately, especially when you have children. I think people like fail to realize that's not the simplest thing. And that's actually what I wanted to ask you next was, so I'm so like inspired, not only by, of course, your journey, everything you've done. Of course, I want to get more into the nonprofit, absolutely. But also like your children. Like, I think it's wonderful that I heard little bits, like when you said what you shared, that graduating with your, middle child and having that cool comparison. But like, I was curious because I know that divorce can be hard, and I, again, something I can relate to, like, and all that. But it's just, like with your children, like, how would you say your relationship is with them? Do they help with the nonprofit? Like, I'm super curious about like that piece.
Well, I tell you, I absolutely love my kids, like I think every mother does. And they have been incredibly supportive of me. They were, obviously, divorce is a horrible thing and it affects everybody, but it especially affects the children. And for that, I feel horrible about and hold a lot of guilt. But they have always been so supportive. I mean, when it came down to me sitting down with them and talking to them about, me going ahead and filing for divorce, they were very supportive. They saw things that I was actually surprised that they would see. And also because I was a stay-at-home mom, I was very skilled in certain areas, but when it came to computers, I knew nothing. I didn't even know how to copy and paste when I first started the organization. I didn't know what a cloud was. I didn't know any of this stuff. So basically, it was my kids who actually helped me develop our website. and they were, I think my youngest, I don't know if she was around 12 at the time, but the kids at a certain point, I told them, this is what happened to mom and kind of let them all know according to their age, what they could take. I kind of told them a little bit. And, so it was them who actually came alongside me and helped me develop the website, helped me develop certain forms. They even went as far as, because of the things I went through when I was a kid, I wasn't a big scholar. I didn't do good academically. So I'd actually have my middle daughter check my work to make sure my spelling and punctuation was okay at the very beginning. And although that was really hard because it's like, oh my gosh, now I'm realizing all that I don't know, and you've given yourself, 20 something years where you haven't done any self-improvement and it wasn't supported anyways. That was a really scary thing to try and do. And I'm still learning, but I think through all this, I'm probably the most authentic I've ever been in my life. And now it's just like, I don't want to settle for anything else. But I kind of did a long answer for your question, but basically, they've been incredibly supportive. I couldn't ask for a better group of kids.
Oh no, you did the exact kind of response that I wanted, not a long one, just so you know, because I was literally engrossed the whole time. I'm like, wow, that's like incredible. And then like, because clearly that's like a beautiful illustration of support. You know what I mean? It's one thing to say like they're supportive, but man, like the fact that you're seeing them in your work, they literally helped you build it. Like everything about that is beautiful to me. And I'm actually glad that you also didn't mind sharing that. We do get that divorce is, it's not the easiest thing, so that's why I'm glad that you didn't mind sharing. And that's what I wanted you to get into, because I know there might be other people out there, right, that are either considering divorce, might still be in the situation, or just about to get in one, getting out of it, whichever, whatever stage you're at. We understand that it isn't an easy decision, especially if there are children involved. But ultimately, you know what I mean? Like what's on the other side is just, it's priceless though, so it's just that I agree. I definitely think that definitely my children was the reason why I wanted to stay, honestly, in my relationship.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, but I want to keep it. And it's easier to have two people
Yes.
and just do this. Yeah, and I gotta do it all by myself. Like, how am I gonna? Yeah, so I agree. That's why I'm like, I'm right there with you. But for them to then see their mom like take that stand, you know what I mean? And to really see like how, no, it wasn't just that I know I wasn't making the easy decision, but I was making the best decision for us. So like, even though it was that, I was, keeping all of that in mind. So that's why I just think it's just incredible that you were able to do that, but even more incredible that they're able to see that, and then respect you all the more for it. And then know that, it was for, keeping the family in mind, to be honest. So that is definitely beyond incredible. But with that, you also did talk a little bit more about your nonprofit, of course. And that's what I wanted to ask too. So I heard that the babies actually helped build the website and all that. And they've been proofreading, they've been reviewers. I love it. You don't have to put them on the payroll. But I love that, they've helped do all that. But I am curious, like, to know not only that you wanted to do this, but then specifically nonprofit, right? Because you could have made it a business, you could have made it a something else. Like, what made you, get on that path? Like, did you research, like, what did that part of the journey look like?
Well, back then, when I started it, you didn't hear about peer support like you do nowadays, which I'm really happy about, that we have the peer support models and that you're starting to see more peer support out there. But when it started, I didn't know how I wanted to do it. All I knew is that there was a power in survivors getting together and sharing conversation. I found that by getting survivors together, you're able to heal in a different way than maybe you would if you were just going to an individual therapist. Because unfortunately, a lot of therapists, although there's a lot of good ones out there, not a lot of them are very trauma informed as far as for sexual abuse and that sort of thing. So, I felt like, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, how am I going to do it? Because I really don't necessarily have a product I'm selling. And I thought, well, if I went the nonprofit route, how am I going to afford this? Because, when you leave a marriage of that length, financially, you're destroyed basically. And, without having income, how are you going to build this business? So I ended up thinking nonprofit. So I went nonprofit just to see if, what that would morph into. And it was scary. And, you constantly had the imposter syndrome. Who am I to do something like that? And in fact, when I started it, I had to also wrestle with the fact of, okay, once I start something like this, there's no going back, because I'm going to have to become more public with what happened. And, I didn't start dealing with my abuse till 2012. So just a couple years later, that's when I kind of started to really get my voice, and it just built up the energy. And at a certain point, I felt secure enough in myself to say, okay, I don't care what anybody else thinks about this. There were people that thought, are you crazy? What are you doing opening up a nonprofit? You need to work in a regular job because you don't have any money. What are you doing? And for me, I guess it was like a mission for myself, a mission that I wanted to just develop this into something that other survivors could then come alongside and maybe have things to offer survivors too. So, I always tell people, as far as a nonprofit, it isn't about me. It's about serving others and bringing community together to put light on a subject that, 1 in 4 kids and 1 in 6 kids are experiencing. And I hate statistics because, as I throw that out there, I'm thinking I hate statistics because we know that that's not that, most stay quiet, most stay silent because of shame and blame. So we know that those numbers are probably way higher.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. They don't always fully capture exactly what's out there and all of that. So I agree. Like, it helps. It's like a good starting point for the conversation, but yeah, it doesn't capture it fully. But wow, that is awesome that was, like, your thought process behind it. and that, you know, helped it. And actually peer support. So that was the other thing that I did want to ask you about specifically. So for those who don't know or have any idea, so like you said, they may still be in that place where they might not know exactly what peer support is. Could you let us know exactly what that is, but also how you learned about it? So like you said, especially because people weren't talking about it. So how did you come, you know, how is it that you learned about it yourself?
It was actually, I just started, you know, at a certain point, I was just trying to soak up every kind of information I could, and I just accidentally stepped on a website, and I can't even remember what website it was, but they were out east, and they were talking about peer support, and I thought, well, what is that? So I was looking into it, and I realized peer support is people using their own experience in healing to help others. And I thought, hey, this is where we get some of our power back in a way. And so learning about that, and you know, we started out where I was just doing it out of an AA facility. They were kind enough to let us just have some space, and then from there we ended up moving to a different location, and then eventually a different location. COVID, unfortunately, has really, we took a hit from that, like a lot of other nonprofits. Many have closed and that sort of thing. But peer support is just a great way of people getting together, and you know, it's awesome that I can be a part of other survivors, and being able to see, you know, as a facilitator, to be able to see a room full of survivors, whether it's over Zoom or in person, see them come together, and maybe there's a new person coming in the group that's terrified, full of anxiety, and you start to see that one person's experience, by them talking a little bit about it, helps others to get their voice. And so to see that dynamic work and see the support that they could give one another, and maybe the ones that were further along in their journey being able to help the ones that are just starting out, and for the people that are just showing up to be able to sit there and have somebody else say something and be a light bulb moment for them, where they're like, oh my gosh, you just said everything that I've ever felt, but I don't know how to put words to it. So I think there's just a real power in peer support. So I hope I answered your question.
Of course, as always, yes, you did, and in the way that I wanted. And actually, again, it was not only helpful and super thorough and everything. Was that I thought it was just ironic too that, like, given what you shared about peer support, that you were able to start off in an AA facility, right? Because like in AA meetings, like they kind of take advantage of peer support also in the fact that it's
Yes.
community, right? So I was like, oh, like, how ironic is that? That like you were in a facility that also does a version of that, and then, like, you know, just for something different, but same thing, right? They're united in their struggles, they use each other to support, and then they just kind of like thrive from there. So yeah, I definitely think that is amazing. And so because of that too, I'm curious about that, like you mentioned, some of those services. So I remember I heard peer support, but I know there's like other classes that you do. You've even done conferences at this point. So I was just curious, like for those of us who might not know about your organization, like what all have you done, hope to do, you know, wish to do in the future? Just like what are all the things that you offer?
We've gone into the House and Senate committees in Minnesota and tried to get certain laws passed. I've been on a lot of podcasts, written newspaper articles. We did have a conference every year that was hoping to bring people from across the country there. We had, you know, I always want it to be not only peer support, but I think it's really important also bring professionals in, and maybe have them educating us on certain things, you know, in that, to help us better understand and heal. So we'd have a yearly conference. Unfortunately, with COVID, we had to suspend all the conferences. But at this point, what we do is on Mondays, we have a program called Conversations with Elizabeth, and that's all held over Zoom, so people can, you know, listen in from the comfort of their own home. But what we try and do is have a guest that can talk on a specific part that has to do with either sexual abuse, the healing process, mental health, or something like that. So we have guests that will volunteer their time to come on around the country, and so that's our Monday night program. And then Thursday evenings, we have peer support group over Zoom. So that's, a time where survivors are able to come together, maybe have conversations. Maybe somebody's, they're newly into this, so it's like it's all nightmares and intrusive thoughts and flashbacks. So having something like that enables, somebody to come in and go, this is where I'm at, and to be accepted that is where you're at, and then have somebody else go, yeah, I used to have terrible nightmares, or boy, all day long it was intrusive thoughts and flashbacks, but this is how I work through it. And that's just, it's just really been, it's been just lovely to see how all that works. But we're hoping to add more classes. Unfortunately, due to COVID, all our in-person classes we had to stop. So we used to do a journaling class. We had, yoga classes. I mean, we want to incorporate the whole mind, body, soul. So we want to be able to offer classes that will hit each one of those.
Ooh, yeah, awesome. And I mean, and I agree, like it's just what's integral to like being able to get that healing together is to hit all those areas. So I just think it's like so wonderful that you're hitting all these areas of wellness and then really helping people to get that balance, regain it, which obviously gets knocked off completely. So like speaking of COVID of course interrupted a lot of things, but so does trauma. Like obviously when somebody faces trauma, just like it, good old comparison there is that it knocks you off course, absolutely. But so I'm curious too. So like, given that it's a nonprofit, any cost then associated with any of the classes? Is everything? Were you able to provide everything free of charge? Like, is it all grant funded, or like were there some costs involved with some?
Well, to date, we've never gotten a state or federal grant. Everything, the donations that we get are strictly from people like you and I who just might donate $5-10 or whatever they're able to do. Unfortunately, the funding piece isn't always, with same thing with a lot of nonprofits. It's a constant struggle. But at this point, we don't charge for the programs that we have. I think if it continues to be, we don't want to. I mean, this whole time we've never charged. We do ask people if they're able to give a donation. But we're hoping that it doesn't get to the point where we have to charge, because I know that so many people, they don't have the financial abilities to pay for this. And oftentimes maybe they've spent 20 years in therapy, and peer support can be something that, I've had people come to me and say, wow, I was in therapy 20 years and here I come here, and you're talking about things and getting things that I could never get the other person to understand. So you're seeing that growth. I guess we want to keep it as, price free, but the reality of it is at some point we may have to start to do a small charge. But as of now, we do not.
Wow, but that's incredible. The fact that people have been like just like able to be generous in that way. And that's actually precisely why I asked though, because I don't think, in case there are people who might not know about the operations that go into nonprofit, it's exactly what you said. It's not that simple. I think the mission is always beautiful. It's always, like wonderful, but it's hard. It is hard. So that's why I think it's also admirable that you took that on. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I agree. I realize that is unfortunately a tough reality, is that there are. And that's actually another thing I want to ask you though, is that, so like you said, a lot of people didn't have to close. They were forced to close during COVID, especially at the height of the pandemic. They weren't able to, keep their doors open. So I'm super glad that was not the case for you all, but I am curious how you did it. So like, how were you able to pivot? Yeah, right? Like what happened during that time? I'm definitely curious.
Well, it was tough. We got to the point where, we had a really nice office space with a lot of room to have different groups in different rooms. Unfortunately, because of the lack of donations and because of COVID and that sort of thing, we ended up where I didn't sign the lease to keep our office. So now we operate out of my home office. So that's what we're doing now. I also, in order to keep the nonprofit alive, chose not to take a salary. so far we're able to do that, but you know, again, we'll have to kind of take it year by year and see how that works out.
Absolutely. But I also feel like, and of course, once again, like, you know, I remember you to be able to do that and all that. But I think too, as everyone's listening, this is why it's so helpful when people are able to like donate to this. And of course, if any of this resonates with you, feel free to like support. Because no, absolutely. And even just in other ways too, like with, you know, with all the services that you're doing, like obviously if there's people that are thinking like, oh, I might want to connect with her because of that. Yes, that's exactly why we like to have these conversations. That's why we're having, because yeah, I agree. And I'm just glad. I'm definitely glad that like not to hear how difficult it was because unfortunately it was difficult for all of us. But I'm so glad to hear that, right, that you were able to do that though and do what you could to still be here today. Because I'm definitely very happy that we're still, you know, you're still here. And I can't agree more that the services are definitely incredibly important, you know, so like super critical. And I just think I totally see that. I agree that, you know, therapy, like you said, it is kind of like a fit situation. So like you might not, even if there are good therapists, like you mentioned, you might have to like shop around. It's kind of like dating. You got to find the right person, you know, so like, and some people don't have the patience for that. We get that. But also that might not be like that also might not be what they want or like where they're at. And so like peer support, everybody's just coming how they are, you know, they're just sharing what they are, and nobody's trying to like, you know, put on a front for anyone, right? Because like we've all been here. So there's no need to like hide behind any like mask or exterior. You can just come as you are. So that's what I think is like so remarkable about that approach. But also like that's why it's so wonderful. And I do wish that more organizations honestly could, but I'm glad that you all are one that does, you know, and so like
thank you.
Oh, absolutely. I'm only hoping it can grow from here and that more people will be inspired to donate as they hear this message.
Yeah, me too.
Right. Put it together. But I agree though. I definitely think like it is great that, you know, like I said, it's awesome to be able to do that. So then, and so with that, with the conferences and all the other stuff you mentioned, I know you alluded a little bit to it, but like, is that also something that you hope to bring back, or like, you know, like the conference piece and all those jazz? Yeah. Like what all did they touch on before? Like what kind of topics and things, like how did that all look?
Oh, the conferences?
Yes.
So typically when we had the conference, we'd have, you know, vendor booths and that sort of thing. And then we'd have one main speaker. Like we had, I don't know if you know who Matthew Sandusky is, but one year well, actually a couple of years, Matthew came and donated his time. So he came as our main speaker, and then we'd bring in other mental health professionals. So maybe they were talking on, you know, what is, you know, like the first conference, it might have been, you know, what is sexual abuse? That might have been a topic. And then you have a survivor story, and then somebody else coming in and talking about adverse childhood experiences, how that leads to health and mental health issues later on and that sort of thing. So we always try to have, you know, something that's pretty diverse, where it's educating people, giving them the tools that maybe they aren't aware of, and then sharing in a story and seeing that, you know, it is possible to go through these things in life and be able to make changes and go on to have a better life.
Absolutely. See, so yeah, so that's why I feel like, yeah, that's like wonderful. And that's why I think it's so awesome to be able to have that platform, to have that, you know, to be able to provide that and discuss that and have that be the focus of, you know, what you're talking about. And then it just amplifies what you're already doing, you know, with your center and everything. Right. And being able to do that. So I think that's awesome. But then also, what about for you though? So now, you know, we've gotten to know a little bit about, you know, the organization, a little bit about you from the past and all that. What's in store for your future? You know, you personally, do you have any like goals? I mean, you don't have to share everything with us. I mean, something private. But you know, if there's anything like upcoming for you, because I mean, I feel like future's bright. Thankfully, we're kind of on the other side of the pandemic, kind of not, you know, like it's weird, like a weird reality that we're living in. But you know, I'm just curious what's in store for you.
Well, I mean, we're hoping that eventually, or I'm hoping that eventually we can have retreats, which we were planning on having before COVID. I mean, during COVID, we had set everything up to have a retreat, and unfortunately, we had to cancel that. But my hope is to have more retreats. My hope is to have more holistic health people coming in and helping in certain areas. Also, I'd like to get more survivors involved, where, you know, we have so many survivors with so many great talents, you know, and to have somebody come under the Empower Survivors umbrella and maybe say, hey, you know, on Tuesday evenings, we're going to offer a Tai Chi class, or we're going to offer, you know, a DBT class or something like this, dialectical behavioral therapy type of thing. And so my hope is more for that. As far as me, I hope that, you know, I continue to grow, that I continue to learn, that I don't get myself, you know, when I think as survivors, we can get ourselves into a dither sometimes, and it's like, what am I doing? You know, my hope is just to grow in all those areas and basically be a good mother to our children and, you know, productive member of society, basically.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. Which isn't always easy. That might be have its own challenges in it. So, absolutely. But I agree. These are all great goals. We'll definitely support you on your journey with that. And I'll do the same because I'm always working on that myself. So yeah, I definitely agree.
No kidding.
Yeah, for real. But wow, but that's awesome. But I definitely think it's definitely a great list of things, you know, like I said, to be working on, to be doing. I definitely think, of course, your organization is incredible. It's such a beautiful testament, like I said, to not only everything that you know gone through in the past, but just such a beautiful introduction into what you know can come in the future, and you're helping to build other people's futures as well. So like they can come in wherever they're at with whatever they experience, and they too can then see themselves also growing, also healing, and picture other things that for so long they probably could never picture, and now they have this opportunity, right, to like put words to it, to actually even process it, to think about it, and to let it even enter their mind. That's what I, you know, just love. So with that, I'm just, you know, so if anybody wanted to, you know, connect more with you or like learn more about you, like I'm just curious, you know, how can they do that? And, you know, how can they connect with you?
You can check out our website. So that's at www.empowersurvivors.net. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and then we did just start a new Facebook, or I'm sorry, not Facebook, a YouTube channel that will have all the recordings from our Monday evenings programs. So that gives people a chance to be able to maybe listen in their own time, be able to stop the tape if it gets too triggering and that sort of thing. And you know, that's, or they can call me. I mean, frankly, I put, you know, if you go to the website, you can call me anytime. If you're somebody who is just getting into your healing process and you're thinking, boy, I just can't talk to anybody about this. How am I going to say even the words? I mean, you know, oftentimes I'll just get a phone call where, you know, a survivor calls up and they say, this is where I'm at, and, you know, this is really scary, and what can I do about this? So always here to chat, always here to try and offer more classes and that sort of thing to better serve our community.
Absolutely. And then I think that's and it's amazing that you said that, because you also mentioned the word intrusive thoughts. So I don't know that everybody always like words it like that, but I mean it's a beautiful way to capture it. I just think I agree that like that's also something that like is very good to, you know, highlight and emphasize, is that so we again agree that that might be what's triggering you, right? There's different individuals who, because of that may be your experience, that unfortunately you stop, but you still have nightmares, or you have what you call, like I said, the intrusive thoughts, or, you know, these thoughts that are bothersome to you, to the point where literally like they take over your attention, right? So I'm actually glad you also had brought that up, and that you're sharing with us that you serve as a resource for that. You know what I mean? So like you like offer yourself up in that. Of course, you can like connect them as well, but that, you know, you can also assist, because yeah, some other people that might be also what's stopping them from getting help, right? Is that, like you said, some people are not trauma informed, and then some people might not know how to help, you know, help people properly with that kind of thing. Exactly, especially when they've never dealt with it themselves. So I think it's just amazing that you not only offer support in that area, but you yourself can also speak on it as well, like in the center and throughout.
Also. Oh, thank you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then also with that too, I'm glad that you I wanted to ask though, so like did they sign so like I love that the YouTube channel like offers recordings of the Monday night and all that, and so because I do think, like you said, it's a beautiful way to like it's such a safe way, right, to be able to preview and see, you know, do I want to be a part of it and all that. Or was anyone at all like opposed to that at first, when as far as the recording, like were they open?
You know, that's the thing is, at the very beginning, we didn't do recording because I wanted people to be able to have a conversation without that worry. Then we decided at a certain point, because people were saying, hey, you know, I mean, we have a lot of people, you know, and I dealt with it myself, that disassociate. And because of that, they might have they might have listened, you know, tuned into the program. And after it gets done, they're thinking, boy, I really wish I could listen to that again. And so at a certain point, we thought, okay, we'll record it, but then I have somebody go into that recording and take out people's faces and that sort of thing. So it kind of protects survivors that are coming to the program. And of course, our Thursday evening group, that would never be recorded because that's more intimate and that sort of thing.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. Yeah, because that's what I was curious. I was like, I would love for it, but that's what I thought. I was like, I could see some people like not being as, you know, open right away. And then like, how do you play that tricky balance? But I think that's such a, you know, excellent way to be able to do that is that, yep, like at least with the anonymity. And I think that's helpful for individuals who are considering to know that too. So even though you heard, yeah, right, that there's recording, as you heard, it's not that you're just going to be on display. So, you know, rest assured, it's just that it's just helpful, like you said, for processing. But then definitely for preview, I think that, like you said, those are two big pieces. If you're at all doubting whether or not you should join, at least this gives you the proper introduction, just so you can see. And then if you like the format, then absolutely you can be a part of it, which I'm sure, like you said, was your intent behind it.
Well, and two, you know, I've had survivors reach out to me and they're like, I really want to be on it, but, you know, I really want to take part in it, and I'm like, I totally get it. So, you know, on Zoom, fortunately, you can change your name, you know, to put, you know, if you want to use an alias. Frankly, that's what, I mean, when I was first starting out, I didn't want anybody knowing who I was, where I was going. You know, none of that, because the shame and blame were so thick. Now, of course, I don't care, but
right.
But so people, you know, if they're nervous about maybe their name being seen or something like that, they're able to change that. They can also, you know, use a photo on the camera or keep their cameras off, you know, and that sort of thing. Because, you know, I do think it's real important that they're able to feel safe in those situations, the programs and groups.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm glad we spoke on it, because yes, we definitely understand that. And if you're developing the courage to come to something, that's not easy either. Like even to just seek help, it takes a lot, you know. And so of course, right. And because that's totally we recognize that. I'm glad, you know, I'm glad that you provide all these supportive spaces and that's what they look like. That's why I was like, you know, like super impressed by that too, like, and just moved that that's even an option, you know, to be able to have that, you know, individuals could see it. But I'm glad that in the process, there's still those efforts taken to still protect those, because of course, you know, we still deserve that protection. So yeah, I think it's like a great way, like I said, to provide, you know, the two, give that, you know, exposure, but then also still protect those who are in it. So yeah, it's amazing. So yay. So with that, I mean, you said it a little while ago. So before we like officially wrap up, one more time, that website, any handles that you mentioned, all that jazz.
Okay, so the website is www.empowersurvivors.net. You can also reach me on the phone, 651-323-4721. And again, you can find us on Instagram, YouTube, and then Twitter.
Yay. And so with that being said, you've heard it here. And so obviously there's no excuse not to be able to find you some way, somehow. You're on multiple channels. So yes, absolutely. Yes. So if you, like I said, if anything resonated, please reach out to Elizabeth and definitely get connected with Empower Survivors. And as a result, please know that there are people out here trying to literally empower survivors. That's what I love about the name as well. You know, like help them thrive, help them move on to these brighter futures. Is there anything else that you wanted to add also, Elizabeth? You know, any closing words?
I guess my closing words would be that to any survivors that are out there that think that, you know, we get this thing when, you know, about ourselves, thinking that we're, you know, maybe trash or that we're, you know, all these terrible things, and maybe either a perpetrator had put those words in our head or just the situations themselves put all the negative self-talk in there. And I just want to say to any survivors that are out there, you know, it's bad enough that you had to go through the abuse alone. You don't need to go through the healing process alone. So, we're here, we try and help as best we can and give people resources. But if you are somebody out there that's dealt with this, it isn't your fault. It never was. Even if a perpetrator told you it was your fault, it's never the fault of a child ever. And as you go through the healing process, you'll see that, you were a beautiful child that deserved to be treated a certain way, and you deserve love and support. And that's what we hope to do at Empower Survivors, is to love people and support them through a really tough time.
I definitely think that that's something that I'm so glad you shared that, because it's definitely something that can't be shared enough, honestly. And I think that, we all got that inner child, right? Unfortunately, inside of all of us that are like, well, fortunately and unfortunately, because I think it's a good thing to be connected to your inner child, but then it can also be, it can be triggering as well. And like, it can be all of those things. But speaking to that inner child and speaking to that budding, human and the growing adult, that absolutely, I agree that you do. You absolutely are not alone. And I love that you shared it. It definitely isn't. It definitely isn't your fault. And like you mentioned, because especially during some formative years, nobody ever asks for these situations to happen. Nobody's ever prepared for these situations to happen.
Absolutely.
And when and like you said too, when it comes to healing, nobody like knows exactly where to go, right? We don't always know. We might not have all the answers, but if you have nowhere else and you want to start here, not a bad place to start, I would say, because all these supportive resources there. And like you said, because it's also people that understand. So I think that that's what's beautiful about what you have. And as a result, not only is there going to be that certain level of understanding and empathy, but also just the fact that, there's going to be that lack of judgment as well, clearly, because they've been there.
Absolutely.
So, right, you're having people that have seen that struggle, have been in that struggle, and want to help you genuinely get out of it because they've been there themselves. So I just think that's an awesome thing that you're doing. So Elizabeth, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on. Viewers, it's been a pleasure as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to connect with Elizabeth, and thank you as always for supporting, tuning in, and being your wonderful selves. Thank you.
Thank you.